So intelligent communication for business, we've really tried, both John and I have worked individually with people and with small groups of people, and I think for this presentation we really wanted to tailor it to business, decisions that people make in business, and how emotional intelligence and nonverbal communication makes a big impact in your ability to be successful in business. If you can't connect with your job, if you're not motivated in your job, if you can't communicate and cooperate with other people, a lot of that's based on an inability to communicate effectively and to know yourself and to know how to interact with other people. By and large, we test people because they might have some significant educational needs or something like that, so we can tell if they need special services. And what we know about people over time is that as you get older, some of your IQ goes down just because of the way that it's tested. But emotional intelligence doesn't go down. In fact, you can continue to advance your emotional intelligence throughout your life. 90% of those people doing well are differentiated from others by their emotional intelligence. So what is emotional intelligence? You know, I had a colleague of mine for years, and he was going through some emotionally difficult situations, and he would tell me, he'd say, you know, Todd, I really wish that we didn't have emotions, because emotions always get in the way. They always get in the way of making decisions, and that's, you know, it complicates everything. And I've always thought emotions, on the other hand, were kind of like our secret powers. They're our secret ability, because emotions are tied to everything that we do. They underline every decision we make, every behavior, every activity that we do, every thought that we think has a grounding in our emotions. Now, maybe not dramatic emotions like what we experience when we're, you know, really frustrated or really angry or excited or happy or something like that. But, you know, the way that our brain processes emotions is a big part of what we see everything around us, including all of our memories. The way that we store memories is significantly impacted by our emotional attachment to those memories. First is self-awareness. Okay? First, you have to be able to know yourself. You have to be able to know, how are you processing information? When you encounter a situation, what are your emotional feelings to that? And they don't have to be significant, like I said, they don't have to be significantly dramatic, but what's your gut telling you? And what are the triggers for you? What are things that make you frustrated? You know, when you get in a car and you get behind somebody and you can tell that they're on their cell phone in front of you, all of a sudden it creates this kind of anxiety, like, are they paying attention? Do they know what's going on, really? You know, and you internalize that. Now that's something small, but it may play into your next decision. It's also going to play into how you remember that scenario. So self-awareness is about knowing yourself. It's about understanding how you're processing information and how that plays into your relationships. It affects your thoughts and your behavior. It helps you know your strengths and your weaknesses. And it helps you to have self-confidence, because all of a sudden you're going to know how you're going to respond in certain situations, and then you're going to be able to take control of that. So those are kind of the general principles about emotional intelligence. I think John's going to tell us more about some of the science and the art of putting the nonverbal communication together.
When Todd and I first started talking about what we do and programs we sell and provide and really are passionate about, you know, I just saw Todd's background and his communication management training and coaching as the perfect complement to what I do, which is nonverbal. So Todd is the foundation to what we've talked about before with body language and what I'll talk about a little bit now. But understanding that precursor to the physical part of it is magical. I mean, and that's today's title is Intelligent Communication for Business. So it's all about the relationship, and I'll call it the pitch or the sale, the product, and on the reverse side, maybe you're just a buyer, maybe you're a manager of people. You're not selling something, but you're still selling yourself. You're selling culture, right? And Todd and I got into, I don't know, about 4 or 5 hours of conversation on the brain and how the brain is a key component at our age to our success. How many people and how many times do you go into a relationship, a business setting, a client shows up, you got somebody on the call, and you're just not there. You're not on the same wavelength or the same plane. Somebody walks in and wants to buy a car. You know, how do you get them there? How do you get into that? We call it mojo. I call it mojo. I've been calling it mojo for years. When you got the mojo and you feel it going, is that typically a good sign or a bad sign? So we're going to go right now. We're going to go from the psychological piece, you know, the setting, you know, the relationship setting and preparation that Todd talked to, right into, okay, what do you do next? withhold the ask, whatever that ask is. Do you want to buy the car? Do you want a mortgage? Are you looking to buy a house? You know, we all want to jump there, right? Do you have a business to buy, right? Business to sell, right? We all want to jump there fast and find out if that's going to be my guy or my client or my woman, and am I going to get this deal, okay? So what do you have to do with Todd's training? You have to hold that emotion. You have to contain it. You have to know about it. You have to realize what that is, right? You have to really be in charge of the emotional piece of this before you get to this next step. All right. So I talked earlier in our prior session about, how do I look? How do I look? How do they see me? Who's they? The client or the customer, or maybe I'm interviewing for a job. How do they see me? So we call that reflexive visualization. In your mind, can you figure out what you look like to somebody else as you walk down the hallway, as you sit in the waiting room, as you sit across the desk from them or across the table or in a meeting? Are you always aware of that? Again, mentally, put yourself where the camera is and say, what does a camera see me doing? How do I look? And why is that so important? Your client's innate senses is going to establish credibility for you before you ever open your mouth. Happens all the time, right? Happens every day. The person behind the counter, the waiter or waitress serving you, person you might just see holding a door as you walk into Panera. You look at people, and do you cast judgment immediately? Do you? You know what? You know how your brain works so fast that decision has already been made how many seconds before you actually think about it? 3 to 5 seconds. 3 to 5 seconds before you realize you have a thought, your brain has already completed that process based on emotional intelligence. So practice, practice, practice. Remember, all of this emotional intelligence is innate. I talk about what's innate, but it's natural. It's how the brain works without you realizing it. But if you understand it, you realize how important it is. Gestures are anything they do with the body, basically, okay? Without getting too, we can spend an hour on gestures. What are they doing with the body? Are they relaxed? Are they comfortable? Or are they tense? Are they stressed? Are they looking at the watch? Do you know your meeting's already over because they're late to something else, something came onto their agenda? And again, if you're sensing all this negative posturing and negative gestures, what are you going to do? Are you going to proceed or back off? How much is verbal versus nonverbal? All the communication. 30%. Yeah. 70%. Yeah. Like 30% of it verbal, 70% of your interaction is nonverbal. So think about more than half of my interaction is going to be nonverbal. Going back to the handshake, how I looked at walking in, the nonverbal meaning two people not talking to each other, but two people interacting with each other, which we do all the time. And so I say, listen with your eyes. If you know to listen with your eyes, you're ahead of the game, because what are other people doing? They're listening with their eyes. They're watching, okay? You don't need ears to make decisions. Your brain doesn't need audio. Your brain works faster, and I think it was 90 times faster visually than it does audibly. So your eyes see, your brain receives, your brain, emotional intelligence goes to work and figures stuff out before it ever gets to the mouth or the ears. Just know that. And knowing that 58% or more of communication is nonverbal gives you the leg up, gives you the advantage, okay? Because if you know that person watching me is doing the same thing I'm doing, but I know the secret here. I know his brain is seeing me and making decisions versus hearing me or even talking with me. I can play to that, can't I?
Paying attention to the senses is so important. If you even think about the way the brain works, what do you think the number one sense is that makes decisions for you before anything else?
So up to the left or the right. Does anyone remember what that typically implies? Typically implies honesty, okay? And down would typically imply what? Dishonesty, deceit, discord, disagreement. I'm not going to say lying. I never say lying because you don't know that. Real connection is eye contact, direct eye contact. Okay, that's real connection. If you're in your mojo, you're in a groove, you're direct eye contact. Everybody knows what feeling good means. Everybody knows what feeling good really feels like. Okay, I'm gonna let you figure that one out. But if you're not feeling good, you got even a 10% disconnect, if they're looking up and to the left or to the right, they're thinking. They're thinking, literally, their eyes, it's all involuntary eye movement, they're thinking about something and trying to figure something out. Maybe trying to recall something, get a memory, ask for a lot. You asked a question. Now the key here is connections. So when you get somebody disconnected at the desk or in a conversation or in response to a question, and these are the tricky questions. It might be about price. These are where you start to really pick up on people's nonverbal responses. Price or timing on a purchase or how much, or are you really the decision maker? These are the types of questions you really, really got to be in tune to the reply on. You already know this stuff. Okay, now you're understanding why it happens. You've already been in these conversations. You've already been in these disagreements or conflicts or failed business interactions, and you didn't know why. And you walked out feeling pretty bad. Anybody have one of those? You walk out saying, what the hell happened? What happened in our meeting? What happened? Why didn't he buy from me? But if you go back and play the video, you go back and say, wow, I missed the cue. And that's another word for nonverbal gestures or microexpressions are cues. What cues are they giving to you? Now you could get a really good response. And the key to getting the response is knowing what the response is. Is it positive or negative? What was the trigger? What did I say or do that caused that reaction? If it was good, I'm going to do it again. If it was bad, what I'm going to do, I'm going to back up and I'm going to come back with a softer approach to that issue. Watch the launch. Launch a question. Never launch a question without being ready to observe. I call it ready, set, watch. Ready, set, watch. Okay, you know what your questions are. You know what your selling process is. You know you've been through this 100 times. But now, when you ask, you're going to be watching. Never lose sight of the question. Never lose sight of the question. Then never lose sight of the response. The response, again, is how soon will the body tell you if they're really happy or not or negative before the words? How soon, as soon as you launch that question, how soon will that body give you an answer? Immediately. How soon will the words come out? 3 to 5 seconds, at least 3 to 5 seconds later. Have you ever been in a situation where you asked a question and you knew what the response was before the words ever came out? And how did you decipher that? Primarily it was the facial expressions, right? Eyes, mouth, lips, body, the whole body. They can just, do you really want to buy, can you buy this today? Maybe. And we all know what that means. Because innately you already have this skill. We're just teaching you to fine-tune it and use it differently, use it to your advantage. Now remember, in the same way that person does this, you got to make sure you never do that. We talked about mirroring and reflexive visualization. If somebody launches you a fast hardball, you got to be careful how you're going to, a deep breath. That's the same thing as, licking the lips. It's the same thing as, physically, defending yourself with your arms and your legs.
And some of this is hard for, I think it's hard for me to know how I'm always coming across to other people, but it's one of the reasons I think when we've done some trainings, when we've done some educating of people, spending time with people and being flexible enough to be really honest, right? Meeting somebody that you can actually sit with, not get defensive about what they tell you, but actually get some honest feedback about how you're coming across in a personal situation. What does your body look like? What does your face look like? How are you holding yourself? It's hard for us to see ourselves, and we're not always going to be near a mirror where we're going to check it out. But if you have that person that's kind of a objective sounding board, and you say, look, this is how I present, and then you present, and they can say, okay, well, and here's some hard feedback. You squint your eyes a lot, or you do this, or you always look down, or you're not doing some of the things that really show your interest and your motivation in moving this forward.